Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Well, this video is going to be a big bonanza wrap up on what I like to call these days food investing. And so what do I mean by that? Well, about when the coronavirus pandemic started, I looked at some statistics on my channel in that in times of conflict and high inflation, things that tend to perform the best price-wise and also recovery-wise are food and farmland. So a little over the past 2 years, I've been investing heavily in farmland, and I think people on this channel have known that it's done very well. And so this is an update. There's a lot of stuff going on in the food and agricultural space right now, so I'm going to cover all of that in this video and prepare you for the future, especially in light of the recent conflict going on in Europe. So first things first, we have compared obviously to the normal market. Here's land over the past month. Obviously this is a stock I've covered quite a bit on this channel. And you can see over the past month, ignoring the crisis in Europe, it is flat. You're not exactly losing money in the stock, let's put it that way. I mean, let's compare it, for example, to another one, a more mainstream stock that would do well during times of high growth, Stag Industrial. You can see just over the past month, it's fallen from $42 to $38, and obviously this is a blue chip. In more like techie NASDAQ companies, this drop will be even further. So for example, if we were to go to a more techie company like Airbnb or more consumer focused, you'll see here, even though it was rising quite well, right before the Ukraine conflict, it fell down to $150, obviously up close to $200. Well, at the same time too, suppose the giants of the markets, right? So the S&P 500 down for the month, the NASDAQ Tech Index down as well. So you can obviously farmland is more stable, though I can say, and I will say that there's drama definitely on the horizon, both in some of my specific stocks I've been buying and selling on this channel, as well as in the general news. So we're going to cover that now. So that brings us nicely to a SPAC I've been buying over the past year, and that is Glee. This is a SPAC focused on farmland acquisition. If you want to get my more detailed thoughts on this company, I'll have a video linked in the description about this SPAC. But long story short, my investment thesis here, what I think is that this SPAC is trading around cash. It's under the radar, and considering the progress of, for example, a farmland agricultural company like Gladstone Land, ever since the coronavirus pandemic, nearly 3xing from the bottom, you can see that there's a lot of excitement, and definitely farmland and agricultural companies are benefiting from high inflation and food, where everyone is paying higher and higher food prices. So obviously this stock has played out a great deal, Gladstone Land. My suspicion is that the same thing will happen with Glee here, or this SPAC, because it's so under the radar. Everybody hates SPACs so much, because obviously with high inflation, if you can trade cash for farmland, that's amazing, but not many people have access to those kinds of deals. So that's why I like this particular stock. I'm able to buy upfront farmland that's being exchanged for increasingly worthless cash, one of the best places to be on the market. And I think Wall Street agrees with me. That's my opinion. Obviously, I think the prices of food and farmland are going to increase over time, especially with high inflation. You're free to disagree. That's what I think personally. So now for news, we have the earnings call transcript, which is just, I think, recorded a few days ago. Yes, it says right here on February 23rd. And they talk a little bit about my favorite SPAC. So we have a question here from an analyst. Could you give us an update on the SPAC regarding any potential developments there? And the reply to that is very interesting. We've got some opportunities and we're going to try to get those done soon so that the SPAC can get funded, no guarantees. It's always hard to get those things done and much harder than we ever thought, though, it was going to be getting into that business. So right now the SPAC is cruising along and we're hopeful that we'll have something to announce in the next 60 days. So I'm going to be watching this very, very closely, and hopefully this is all going to come to a pass and this is going to do very well. Obviously, too, farmland in general has done pretty well considering the crisis going on in the world. You see here, for example, Farmland Partners, which is another, I would say, an equivalent player here in the stock market for farmland players. It's actually up on the month despite all the crisis going on in the world. Now, that said, there's a little bit of drama in food prices, which I'm going to cover right now, which I think you should pay attention to, not even just necessarily from an investing perspective. So we have news here out of Russia, which is, obviously quite the focus of attention in the news these days. But the news here is actually not related to the current conflict, which everyone is paying attention to. This is related to something going behind the scenes, which I suspect obviously you're not going to get too much coverage about, because frankly it has the potential to cause panic or extreme distress, and it relates to food. So we have here a press release from the Russian Cabinet of Ministers, and you see here they temporarily restricted the export of ammonium nitrate, and obviously that's crucial in fertilizer and farming. Now obviously this was done on February 2nd, and you can imagine since this ban was already announced before to go to April 1st, 2022, and later the conflict, I can see this continuing much longer. So I have an article here from Forbes which is talking about the food situation in the Caribbean islands, but I think this actually will generally apply to the rest of the world. If Russia's farmland and Ukraine's farmland is taken out of the picture, other food producers will probably benefit from their supply being more desired and them selling to meet the demands, but also too it does generally threaten food security in the entire world. So we're going to read this right now. From the perspective of inputs, with Russia being one of the world's largest exporters of fertilizer in related raw materials including urea, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, urea, ammonium nitrate, and ammonium nitrate, Caribbean nations, and you can obviously assume the rest of the world too, are facing further increases in production costs after having already been driven up due to short supplies this last year. Ammonium prices are the highest in history and will stay that way for a while due to the war. A recent ban by Russia of ammonium nitrate exports sent global fertilizer prices soaring. And then there's the direct issue of food. Given their status as the breadbasket of Europe, the Russia-Ukraine conflict will have severe implications for the current inflationary dynamics in the Caribbean. You can assume obviously Europe and the rest of the world as well. Despite neither country being a major regional trading partner, globally, Russia and Ukraine account for a third of all wheat exports, amounting to 59 million metric tons, a fifth of the global corn trade, and half the world's sunflower products, translating to 80% of global sunflower oil production. It's no surprise that in the space of a few hours since the invasion, the price of wheat has jumped to the highest level since 2012. And obviously it talks about here how wheat is important in everything, bread, flour, noodles, and even what you're feeding livestock with. Now, obviously, I've looked through pretty thoroughly. Gladstone Land is not a wheat producer, but just generally food prices are going to get hit pretty hard. Now, there's two ways you can approach this. Obviously, the cost of inputs are going to go up for farming companies because of the ammonium nitrate ban, but also, too, they'll benefit from rising food prices because, frankly, they have already, and look to this date, going back to when inflation started around Corona to today, a 3x in the stock price that's better than most companies on the S&P 500. With much greater stability in dividend payments, you can see that high inflation, higher food prices are benefiting farmland companies. There's only so much of those things can take. So at that point, whether you're seriously worried about the ammonium nitrate export ban is a question up to each individual investor. Now let's quickly circle back and look at food prices, which has been the main driver of these stock prices. You can see here, out of everything, this is a chart of costs of certain items, January of 2021, then in January of 2022, and how much they changed. You can see obviously the greatest increases were in gasoline, but to a lesser extent, a lot of these food prices have gone up dramatically, especially in particular the price of eggs, price of oranges, and the price of milk. But it gets even worse with food products for meat. Check this out now. US households were spending more than 12% of their disposable income on food purchases as of the end of 2021, according to data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. That's up 10.8% at the end of 2020. It marked the highest share of food spending in more than 2 decades. The price hikes for proteins have been especially steep. And now remember, to get protein, you have to feed the livestock, vegetables, and feed. So this isn't just only about meat prices. Everything is feeding into each other. As of January, the cost of beef and veal was 16% higher than it was in the same month 1 year earlier. Pork prices are up 14.1%, while eggs are up 13.1%. Fish and seafood 12.7%, and chicken up 10.3%. Overall, inflation is at a 4-decade high of 7.5%. Obviously, inflation is much higher in food products. I've been saying this on my channel for quite some time. When inflation picks up, always, the most basic needs like energy and food get hit the hardest. And as time goes on and people have to spend more and more of their money on basic needs, basic necessities, this leads people to flee their more speculative investments, and they go into areas of safety like farmland, food, and utilities after some time. Now, obviously not everybody's fully tuned on to the inflation thing. A lot of people do believe it's transitionary, and obviously you're free to believe that yourself. I'm just presenting more information for you to make your own decision. However, I do think we're on the knife's edge here. If food inflation does get much worse, I think you are going to see people retreating from other assets and possibly this going even further. There's one general trend from history I like to point out is that times of resource scarcity lead to conflict. Always. It's easy to get along when everybody has everything they need and there's no scarcity, but scarcity always in human history leads to conflict. Conflict creates more resource scarcity, and there's a spiral going on and on and on. So at this point, even just past investing, check up on your food supplies. Make sure your food security is all good, eat healthy, eat right, shop well at the grocery store. And to everyone out there in the food game right now, whether you're growing your own in your backyard or investing like this, I wish the best luck of you. This is definitely going to be a very interesting, exciting quarter here for food, if I had to guess. Now, obviously, I don't think the media and other people in the commentary community want to make a panic here. You can see here between the ammonium nitrate ban, inflation, and the already increasing prices of food here, there could be a food Armageddon coming here. But that does seem to be where the stars are aligning here between the fertilizer and everything else. So let me know what you think. I'll be continuing to cover the farmland investment hypothesis here on the channel. Hopefully things do turn around. I do want to be wrong about this. And it is important to remember that in times of high growth, companies like, for example, Farmland Partners or Gladstone Land, they do underperform the rest of the market. So you can see here with about like an average 2% dividend yield, this company did nothing for like almost 4 years. Again, in 2013, trading at $16 up until like 2019, trading at $12, it did nothing. But for example, if things were to turn around and you do think the economy is going to recover and things are going to go back to normal, food companies and farmland companies will not perform compared to growth stocks, but in times of uncertainty and volatility, they seem to be a very good place to be. That decision is ultimately up to you. All right, everyone, I'll see you next time.